Today's episode is delivered to you in the form of an audiobook-style narration. Our focus today is The Power of Now, A Guide to Spiritual Enlightenment by Eckhart Tolle, a book widely recognized for introducing millions of readers to the transformative potential of living in the present moment. Tolle's core argument is that most of our suffering arises from a dysfunctional relationship with time. We either ruminate on past regrets or anxiously project into future possibilities. By learning to anchor ourselves in the now, Tolle says, we can transcend ego-driven thought patterns, experience deeper peace, and access a spiritual dimension of consciousness that exists beyond mental chatter. Over the next sections, we'll explore the main themes in The Power of Now, including Tolle's journey, his understanding of psychological time, the concept of the pain body, the power of presence in daily life, and the practical advice he offers for staying rooted in the present. 1. Tolle's personal awakening. Eckhart Tolle wasn't always the spiritual teacher the world knows today. He describes how, in his late 20s, he was plagued by anxiety and depression. One night, in a moment of despair, he experienced a profound internal shift, an insight that the constant self-talk in his mind was not his true essence. This revelation triggered a period of deep inner peace that lasted for months, ultimately setting him on a path to share his realization with others. Tolle doesn't frame his transformation as a result of religious conversion or intellectual study. Instead, it was an experiential break from identification with the incessant mental commentary. This story underpins the entire book. The notion that genuine spiritual insight comes from direct experience of presence, rather than from adopting a new belief system or following a doctrine. It's a point Tolle reiterates: you don't need to believe in the now. Once you truly experience it, its self-evident nature dispels doubt. 2. The mental noise and ego. A central claim in The Power of Now is that humans are nearly always caught in an unobserved mind that Tolle calls the ego. The ego builds a sense of identity around thoughts, emotions, personal history, and expectations of the future. We think constantly, rarely pausing to question whether these thoughts are beneficial or accurate. According to Tolle, this mental noise traps us in illusion, especially because so many of our thoughts revolve around regrets about the past or fears for the future. When we identify fully with these ruminations, we lose touch with the real conditions of the present moment. Tolle emphasizes that the ego's voice can be insidious, fueling internal conflicts, resentments, and anxieties that have little bearing on what's actually happening right now. By recognizing the ego's chatter as separate from our true self, we start to weaken its hold, opening a pathway to deeper peace. 3. Psychological time versus clock time. Tolle distinguishes between clock time, the functional awareness of time needed for scheduling, practical tasks, and planning, and psychological time, the mental fixation on past and future that creates emotional distress. Clock time is not the enemy. We do need to recall events and plan for tasks. However, most people habitually blur these two forms of time, turning practical thinking about the future into a chronic, anxiety-ridden mental habit. For Tolle, psychological time births endless guilt about the past and dread about hypothetical problems. The remedy is to handle practical matters, like planning a trip, consciously in the present, then return to presence once the planning is done. The problem arises when we unwittingly carry the burdens of the past or imagined future throughout the day, never really inhabiting the now. This shift from living in psychological time to merely using clock time as needed is key to Tolle's teachings. 4. Present moment awareness. The power of now consistently returns to the practice of aligning one's attention fully with the present moment. Tolle states that the now is all that ever truly exists. Past and future are mental constructs. While this might sound abstract, Tolle clarifies it with practical guidance. Notice that even when you remember the past or anticipate the future, you're doing so in the present. Realizing this can be powerful. By withdrawing energy from persistent mental time travel, we become alert to what's actually here. The sights, sounds, and sensations, as well as the inner sense of being. Tolle suggests simple exercises, such as feeling the aliveness in your body or focusing on your breath. These methods disrupt habitual thinking and bring you into direct contact with consciousness unclouded by thought. Tolle says that, in this state, one experiences a sense of peace, an underlying stillness, in which the body and mind can settle. 5. The pain body. A distinctive concept in Tolle's work is the pain body, which he describes as an accumulated energy field of old emotional wounds. Each emotional hurt, resentment, or trauma from the past can lodge itself in the psyche and body, forming an entity that thrives on negative emotions. Periodically, this pain body wakes up and seeks conflict or drama to sustain itself. It might trigger destructive behaviors or disproportionate reactions to minor triggers. Tolle insists that the pain body is not who we truly are. By bringing presence into the moment, we can observe the pain body's impulses as they arise instead of unconsciously acting them out. Over time, shining the light of awareness on these emotional patterns dissolves their grip. Though it may be uncomfortable, facing the pain body consciously is crucial for genuine healing and for breaking cycles of suffering that otherwise repeat indefinitely. 6. Relationships and the now. Tolle dedicates parts of The Power of Now to how presence affects human relationships. Many relationships, he suggests, are built on patterns of ego and pain body interactions. Two people's unacknowledged pain bodies might repeatedly clash, fueling drama. Without presence, couples often blame each other for emotional pain that actually stems from their own unresolved patterns. Tolle's solution is twofold. 1. Adopt the practice of presence individually, watching your own reactivity and not identifying with it, and 2. Create space in which both partners can be mindful. If even one person in a relationship maintains presence, it can diffuse arguments before they escalate. This approach shifts the dynamic from mutual accusation to mutual understanding. Tolle claims that genuine love arises naturally when people aren't overshadowed by egoic defenses. Love, as he frames it, isn't about romantic fantasy or emotional clinging, but about recognizing the divine essence in oneself and in another. 7. Acceptance and surrender. A recurring theme is learning to accept and surrender to what is. Tolle doesn't mean passive resignation or inaction. Rather, he differentiates between resisting reality mentally versus taking sensible action. For example, if you're in a job you dislike, you can consciously accept that fact in the now, ceasing mental complaining and negativity. From that place of calm acceptance, you either address it, find a new job, talk to your boss, or change your perspective. Or you might discover a deeper reason for being there temporarily. Tolle calls this state of non-resistance surrender, which paradoxically empowers us to respond more effectively to challenges. By not fighting the reality of the present moment in our minds, we conserve energy and see more clearly what practical steps might help. This principle parallels many spiritual and philosophical traditions that advocate internal acceptance as a prelude to wise action 8. The illusory self. Another major insight is Tolle's repeated reminder that the self we usually think we are, our personal story, roles, achievements, fears, is largely a mental construct. We cling to an identity shaped by memory and social labels. Tolle says that discovering our deeper essence, our pure consciousness, is the essence of spiritual enlightenment. He's not advocating a theological framework as much as an experiential realization. We can sense that behind all thoughts, there's a silent awareness. This silent awareness is who we truly are. Tolle describes this as an inner dimension of stillness that can be glimpsed when the mind quiets down or when we intentionally watch the mind without judging. Over time, abiding in that state becomes more natural, leading to a sense of peace, unity with life, and diminished fear of external circumstances. The more we realize this dimension, the less susceptible we are to emotional reactivity and mind-made problems. 9. Observing the mind. Central to Tolle's practices is observing your mind. By observing, he means watching thoughts as if they were clouds passing across the sky, noticing each one without identifying with it. Instead of trying to forcibly stop thinking, you patiently see how thoughts arise and dissolve, all while maintaining a sense of presence in the body or environment. Tolle suggests that this observation automatically reduces the hold of negative thought patterns because they feed on unconscious identification. Once you notice them consciously, they lose power. Over months or years, this technique can shift your baseline mental state from restless or anxious to grounded and calm. Tolle sometimes uses the term watcher or silent watcher for this quality of aware presence. 10. Everyday mindfulness. While Tolle's message can sound lofty, he provides everyday examples of how to practice presence. For instance, he recommends paying full attention to mundane activities, washing dishes, walking, or opening a door. Each action can be an opportunity to sense the aliveness in the body, listen to ambient sounds, or feel the breath. By doing so, we break the habit of incessant mental chatter. Tolle acknowledges that at first, this might feel tedious or unnatural, but as you persist, you discover a subtle joy in being fully where you are. Even short micro-moments of mindfulness, like taking a single conscious breath, can disrupt cyclical, repetitive thought patterns that otherwise spin all day. This approach is akin to many Eastern mindfulness traditions, but Tolle's style is less formal, more direct, and typically westernized in its language. 11. Negative emotions and the power of choice. Tolle says that negative emotions, anger, sadness, anxiety, often signal that our minds are resisting the present moment in some way. If we get angry in traffic, for example, it's because we're mentally insisting the present situation, traffic jam, should not exist. Instead of futilely battling reality, Tolle would suggest either changing what we can or, if that's not possible, accepting it. The latter option might mean relaxing, turning on some music, or just breathing and noticing how the body feels. That acceptance might lead to unexpected creativity, or even the impetus to move on to something else that's within our control. Tolle calls this the inner alignment with what is, a kind of micro-surrender that halts negative emotions from snowballing. He's quick to clarify this doesn't mean moral indifference or complacency about injustices. Rather, it's about not adding mental and emotional baggage on top of a situation that might require clear-eyed action. 12. Facing serious problems or crises. What if the problem is life-threatening or deeply tragic, such as a major illness or a personal loss? Tolle acknowledges these aren't trivial, yet he argues that mental turmoil, fearing worst-case scenarios, replaying regrets, self-pity, still doesn't solve the crisis. Being present can actually create more inner space to cope effectively or find solutions. In urgent emergencies, we often see how time slows down, how people's minds become very sharp. Tolle suggests that presence in adversity can offer a deeper spiritual dimension. We stop seeing ourselves as powerless victims of external forces and tap into a sense of calm strength that might reveal new ways forward, or, at the very least, prevent us from compounding suffering through mental resistance. He also ties this to acceptance of mortality, a theme he sees as integral. When you embrace the impermanence of form, you paradoxically feel more at peace with life as it is. 13. Balance with practical life. A common question is whether Tolle's emphasis on presence means we stop planning or striving. He clarifies that wise planning, goal setting, or reflection is perfectly compatible with living in the now, as long as we anchor ourselves in presence while doing so, and then let go once the plan is made. The problem is the mind's tendency to fixate on future outcomes, turning them into mental stress. Tolle doesn't advocate passivity. He describes taking conscious action when needed, but from a place of clarity rather than from compulsion or fear. If anything, Tolle claims presence often improves results. It fosters creativity, better decision-making, and harmonious relationships. Freed from mental static, we can respond more skillfully. 14. Influence of other traditions. Though Tolle doesn't affiliate with a single religion, the power of now resonates with elements of Buddhism, mindfulness, non-attachment, the notion of no self. Christianity, the kingdom of heaven as a state of consciousness rather than a place. And mystical teachings from multiple faiths. Tolle rarely quotes scripture. Instead, he references universal spiritual principles, gleaning from Eastern and Western sources alike. This ecumenical approach has helped the book reach a broad audience. Seekers who wouldn't necessarily pick up a traditional religious text, but are curious about deeper spiritual or psychological truths. Tolle's language is approachable, focusing on direct experience over dogma, which resonates with many modern readers who feel spiritual but not religious. 15. Criticisms and responses. Some critics argue Tolle's message oversimplifies psychological conditions. What if someone has deep trauma or severe mental illness? Tolle would likely respond that while therapy or medication might help, presence remains beneficial by preventing an over-attachment to negative mental narratives. Others complain the book can be repetitive, cycling back to the same point about the now. Tolle acknowledges that mental reconditioning might require repetition because the mind is deeply habituated to time-based thinking. Still, readers who practice Tolle's suggestions often report a shift in perspective, less anxiety, and a sense of calm. Skeptics might consider giving the exercises a fair try, focusing on bodily awareness, for instance, or quiet observation of thought. Tolle's stance is that direct experience, not intellectual debate, validates the power of presence. 16. Relationships to pain and suffering. A major payoff of Tolle's approach is liberation from chronic suffering, which he sees as mind-generated. Physical pain might be unavoidable, but emotional suffering often arises from resisting what is or from the mental stories we attach to pain. Tolle invites us to test this in small ways. For instance, if you catch yourself anxious about tomorrow's workload, observe how the body tenses, how the mind races, then shift attention to your breath or the sensation in your hand, noticing that in this moment you're safe. If you manage to sustain that attention, you might see anxiety fade Over time, practicing this de-identification with mental constructs can significantly reduce daily stress. Tolle frames it as stepping out of psychological pain into the joy of being, a subtle yet profound shift in how we experience each moment. 17. Guided exercises. The power of now includes informal exercises. Tolle may say, close your eyes and see if you can detect a subtle feeling of aliveness in your hands. Then move that sense of aliveness through your entire body. Another practice is to mentally label thoughts as they arise, planning, worrying, remembering, and gently return attention to the present. Tolle's counsel is to do these frequently, not just once. He also encourages short pauses throughout the day. Before you open a door, take one conscious breath. This approach is reminiscent of mindfulness training, but Tolle frames it in a straightforward modern style. 18. Dealing with resistance. We must acknowledge that the mind, or the ego, often resists Tolle's teachings. For instance, part of us might enjoy complaining or feeling superior, or we may secretly relish rehashing past grievances. Tolle calls this the pain body feeding. He reassures that noticing the resistance itself is progress. Each time you notice the compulsion to dwell on negativity, you create a space of awareness. Tolle encourages gentleness. Don't fight the mind aggressively, simply observe it, as this neutral observation dissolves negativity over time. If you slip into old habits, that's normal. You just begin again. Persistence is key. 19. Critique of future or past. Tolle's repeated instructions to avoid past or future might seem extreme. We naturally have to schedule events or remember lessons learned. Tolle is not banning memory or planning. He's suggesting we do these tasks consciously and then return to the now. The trouble is that we typically carry around mental commentary 24/7, relitigating old arguments or catastrophizing. By shifting to presence, you become fully alive to the here and now, and ironically, this can make the short time spent on practical tasks like planning or reflecting more effective. Tolle calls it focus on what is required this moment and let the rest be. 20. Conclusion. In summation, the power of now is Eckhart Tolle's invitation to live from a deeper state of presence rather than letting the mind's noise define us. He builds on the premise that our incessant identification with past and future robs us of the vibrant reality that exists only in the present moment. Through consistent observation of thought, bodily awareness, acceptance, and non-resistance, Tolle argues we can access a spiritual dimension of consciousness marked by peace, clarity, and renewed relationships. Critics might dismiss this as simplistic or repetitive, but many find that Tolle's method resonates strongly with mindfulness traditions and yields real-life shifts in stress levels and emotional well-being. Ultimately, the essence of the power of now is less about adopting a belief system and more about an ongoing experiential practice. Each moment is an opportunity to break free from mind-made suffering by simply being present. If you're seeking relief from anxiety, longing for a sense of deeper meaning, or hoping to transform how you approach everyday challenges, Tolle's core message remains both radical and deceptively simple. Salvation lies in the now if only we learn to open ourselves to it.